Welcome back to This Day in Irish History. I'm your host, Raymond Welsh. Today, we turn our attention to a pivotal event in Ireland's turbulent political past. On January 31st, 1913, the Ulster Volunteer Force, UVF, was formally established by the Ulster Unionist Council in response to the looming threat of Home Rule for Ireland. This was a moment of deep division, one that would have lasting consequences for Irish and British history. To understand the significance of the UVF's formation, we must first consider the political climate of the time. Since the 1880s, Irish nationalists had been pushing for Home Rule, a form of self-government that would allow Ireland to manage its domestic affairs while remaining under British sovereignty. By the early 20th century, the movement had gained considerable traction, and in 1912, the Third Home Rule Bill was introduced by the British Liberal government with the support of the Irish Parliamentary Party. For many Irish nationalists, this was a long overdue step toward autonomy. But for the Unionists, particularly those in the northern province of Ulster, Home Rule was seen as an existential threat. They feared being governed by a Catholic majority parliament in Dublin, believing it would erode their British identity, economic prosperity, and Protestant values. Under the leadership of Sir Edward Carson and James Craig, the Unionists mounted fierce opposition to Home Rule. In September 1912, over 470,000 people signed the Ulster Covenant, pledging to resist Home Rule by all means necessary. But signatures alone were not enough. Unionist leaders believed that force might be required to prevent what they saw as Dublin's rule being imposed upon them. This led directly to the formation of the Ulster Volunteer Force on this day in 1913. The UVF was not just a symbolic organisation, it was a paramilitary force with serious intentions. Thousands of men joined its ranks, drilling and training in preparation for a possible armed confrontation. In April 1914, the UVF smuggled almost 25,000 rifles and millions of rounds of ammunition into Larne, Bangor and Donaghadee, in what became known as the Larne Gun Running. This bold act demonstrated the seriousness of their commitment to opposing Home Rule by force if necessary. The emergence of the UVF sent shockwaves through Irish and British politics. It challenged the authority of the British government and intensified the already volatile situation. In response, Irish nationalists formed their own paramilitary group, the Irish Volunteers, later that year, deepening the divide between the two factions. Ultimately, the outbreak of World War I in 1914 postponed the Home Rule crisis. Many members of the UVF enlisted in the British Army, forming the backbone of the 36th Ulster Division, which suffered devastating losses at the Battle of the Somme in 1916. Meanwhile, Irish nationalists fought for their own cause, culminating in the Easter Rising of the same year. The legacy of the Ulster Volunteer Force is complex. In some ways, it succeeded in its goal. Home Rule was delayed, and in 1920 Ireland was partitioned, leading to the creation of Northern Ireland, which remained within the United Kingdom. However, the militarization of Irish politics set a dangerous precedent. Decades later, the name UVF would be revived by loyalist paramilitaries during the Troubles, continuing the cycle of violence and division. As we reflect on the formation of the UVF on this day in 1913, we see how deeply the past continues to shape the present. The political and sectarian tensions that defined this era left an indelible mark on Ireland and Britain, one that would influence events for generations to come. Thank you for joining us on this journey through history. Please like, subscribe, and tune in tomorrow for another enlightening episode of This Day in Irish History. I'm Raymond Welsh, Slán go Foil.